I really like the topics. But I really, really wish that he would edit out the drinking noises. It is so unprofessional. This is the fucking Abracast, dude. And I am proud to announce that it's getting a little bit bigger. That's right. Starting March 3rd, we are launching a limited series called The American Sermon. It's the occult foundation of the United States, where we are going to be looking at some of this weird, offbeat, and sinister bullshit tied to the creation of the United States. I am so excited for this. I've been working on it for like a month and a half so far. Officially starting March 3rd, there's probably going to be a cool early episode just so I can get the RSS feed and stuff lined up and straightened out. So, you can keep your eye out for it on the abracast.com. As always, Spreaker. It'll be on Spreaker, and then we will officially roll it out as fast as we can after that. But yeah, keep your eye out for it. In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. O prophet, jihad against the unbelievers and the hypocrites, and be firm against them. Their abode is hell, an evil refuge indeed. Quran 9:73. When you meet the unbelievers in the battlefield, strike off their heads. And when you have laid them low, bind your captives firmly. Quran 47:4. Again, O ye who believe, fight the unbelievers who gird you about, and let them find firmness in you, and know that Allah is with those who fear him. Quran 9:123. Prophet, make war on the unbelievers and the hypocrites and deal rigorously with them. Hell shall be their home and evil fate. Quran 9:7-3. Then when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive and besiege them and prepare them each ambush. But if they repent and establish worship and pay the poor due, then leave their way free. Lo, Allah is forgiving and merciful. Quran 9:5. Allah hath purchased for the believers their persons and their goods, for theirs is the garden, and they fight in his cause, and slay and are slain, a promise binding him in truth. Quran 9:111. Do ye make the giving of drink to pilgrims, or the maintenance of the sacred mosque equal to the pious service of those who believe in Allah and the last day, and strive with might and main in the cause of Allah? Jihad fi sabil Allah. They are not comparable in the sight of Allah, and Allah guides not those who do wrong, those who believe and suffer exile and strive with might and main in Allah's cause. Jihad fi sabil Allah. And their goods and their persons have the highest rank in the sight of Allah, and they are the people who achieve salvation. Quran 9:19-20. Jihad fi sabil Allah. refers specifically to the taking up of arms for Islam. We're in for a good one tonight.
The Abercast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Welcome to the Abercast. I'm John Towers. Thank you for tuning in. I've been threatening to do this episode for quite some time, and I thought that now is as good a time as any to get fucking started on this. So tonight we're going to be talking about one of the most important events in Western history. I put Charles the Hammer Martel up there with Jan Sobieski the third, the king of Poland, who broke the Ottoman Empire in 1683 at the walls of Vienna. I put him right up there with Ferdinand, the king of Spain. He and Isabella created we just did an episode on this last month. So the Spanish Inquisition, they kicked the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula and created Spain, basically. So if there's like a list of dudes who saved the Western world, a list of dudes who are like the reason that we're all not speaking like Arabic or like Pishtun or something, like these are the dudes that did it. So we're going to be talking about Charles, this guy named Charles the Hammer Martel, and this battle, the Battle of Tours. It's also called the Battle of oh my God, hold on. Battle of Poitiers. I'm not a French speaker. I've told you this before. So it goes by both names. Most people talk about it as the Battle of Tours, Poitiers, something like that. So if you guys are hanging in with me, obviously there's some trigger warnings attached to this episode, and I have to warn you guys, we're not politically correct. We're not politically correct. So we're going to be getting into some dicey areas here. But if you're going to hang in there with me, welcome aboard, everybody. Please put your seatbelts on, grab your mason jars, and, adhere to the formula. You know what I'm talking about. The formula for a weapon of mass distraction. Formula for the Jin Jihad. By the way, I was mentioning Jan Sobieski III and him breaking the Ottoman Empire in 1683. If you want to know more about that, I got a comic book all about it. Go ahead and pick that up. So we're starting our story so the Battle of Tours took place in 723. But we're starting our story before that. We're going to start our story hold on, wait a minute. Cheers, everybody. Drinking with me tonight. We're starting our story in 711, in the midst of the Muslim expansion. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632, the Islamic world exploded outwards. I am hilarious. I don't know if I meant to make that joke. The Islamic world exploded outwards, and in 711 to 715, we know this because the Spanish Inquisition episodes from a few shows ago. 711 to 715, the Muslims hit Gibraltar, and they moved into the Iberia, defeating. So Spain was the home of the Visigoths before it was the home of the Muslims or the Spanish. So they moved through Gibraltar into Iberia, and they defeated these Visigoths pretty much overnight. Like, they just basically destroyed these fucking people and essentially taking over what is now called Spain. Now, this is very important. There's a lot of bullshit that's talked about the Battle of Tours. You know, these scholars and these apologists come up with all sorts of reasons for the Muslims to venture into France from Spain. You know, they will just say, well, it was just a raiding party. There's no way it was a real invasion. The Battle of Tours, you know, it happened during a pause in the expansion. There was no religious component to the Battle of Tours is a good one. And the big one is the Battle of Tours was in no way historically significant anyways. So that's their thing. These big-brained scholars, they just flat out do not either understand Islam or even history, or they don't look at this event in any kind of historical context, right? Or they're, you know, I give them the benefit of the doubt and just say that they're stupid, right? But, or, I mean, there's a possibility. Option 3 is that they're just not being intellectually honest. So let's take a look. You know, I like to put shit in context. So let's take a look at that, right? In 632, the Prophet Muhammad dies. 630, he dies, leaving his 6-year-old bride, a widow. She wasn't 6 when he died. She was 6 when they got married, though. Okay, 634 to 641, the Islamic conquest of the Levant. So this is them. They're taking over the region now. In 639 to 642, the conquest of what? Egypt. 633 to 651, the conquest of Mesopotamia. 714, the conquest of Sid. So I don't know how it's pronounced. It's Indian, right? They're venturing onto the subcontinent. They are moving and conquesting into India. 742, the conquest of Maghreb, which is part of Africa. So now they're conquesting Africa. In 711, the conquest of Hispania, or we call it the Iberian Peninsula, or today it's called Spain. So as Islam is expanding, the Christians in Europe were occupying themselves by infighting. There was a lot of political maneuvering going on. A lot of people had a blind eye towards this expansion. But except for this one dude, Prince Charles Martel, he has got a fascinating story. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about him. This is not like a fucking biography. But he was an illegitimate son of the king, right? And he saw. You only can imagine that he saw this expansion. He saw how fast the Visigoths took the knee, and he was like, hold on. So he spent a little bit of time consolidating power, and he raised an army. He raised probably the first Western standing army. So back then, these armies were raised and banned and disbanded according to the harvesting season, because everyone had to spend their time finding food to eat. So they would sow their crops, and then they would go and fight maybe, and then they would go and harvest, and then in the wintertime, no one wanted to fucking fight anyways. So these battles took place, all dictated on the harvesting season, so they can make food for their family. They could grow food for their family. They could butcher their little animals and all this stuff. So Charles was like, yo, we're going to need something a little bit better than that. And I think that he built this army because he saw the expansion that we've been talking about. So what he did is he started taking land and property and stuff from the church to build this army. I think that Charles knew it was only a matter of time before, the religion of peace would come across the Pyrenees with their sharpened scimitars. Anyhow, so we are starting basically with the fall of the Visigothic Hispania. And to put this whole fucking story in context, the Visigoths lived in what is now called Spain, and the Umayyad Caliphate conquered them, like I said, very quickly. And this is what we call the conquest of Hispania. So right on top of Spain, through the Pyrenees Mountains, is France. And this should ring bells for you guys because we just talked about Roland a few episodes ago. Back in the day, we did a whole episode on the songs of Roland, and I just did that mini episode about fucking Roland fighting a giant. But like in 719, only a few years later, they start pushing into what is now France. And they took this little region called Septimania, which was southern Lombardy. They took that in 721. Okay, so in 721, as they're taking over Septimania, which sounds like a horrific disease, this guy named Duke Odo of Aquitaine was like, wait, hold on, what the fuck? These guys can't come across these mountains like this. And he started to put the fucking brakes on all this expansionist bullshit. And they started sieging the Muslims. The governor of the Muslim controlled Spain rode west with an army, and they put a siege on Aquitaine. It wasn't a raiding party. They were sieging a walled city. Like, they had siege engines and shit, right? So, Odo got his shit together, and his army, and all of that. He got his shit together and his army and all of that. And as the city of Aquitaine was about to surrender after 3 months of, attempted raiding, I guess. Anyhow, Odo fucking attacked and smashed these Muslims. And then he did something brilliant. Let me set the scene a little bit. So you have this walled city, right? And in order to siege a city, you surround it, covering all the matters of ingress and egress. We've talked about this in our Crusades episodes before. So Odo's attack it's not like a battlefield where you have like an army over here and an army over there. He was basically attacking a portion of this circle, these troops surrounding this city. So he smashed into this line, right? He smashed into it, and then he feigned retreat. He fucking ducked out. And as the Muslims tried to reestablish their formations, Odo's army attacked again. This time it's a pincer move, a pincer attack. It's also called a double envelopment, right? So I guess we got to kind of get into this a little bit in order to get a little bit of understanding. Like, it sounds pretty cool, right? A fucking pincer move. That sounds pretty awesome, but it's not just good. It's not just awesome. This thing is like the stone cold stunner of battlefield maneuvers. But it's dangerous, right? The idea is if the enemy commander sees it coming, they could just bolt, right? They could just run. It takes a lot of time to pull off and a lot of exposure to pull off, because you're exposing, the side of your movement to the enemy. I hope I'm explaining that good enough. So if he sees it coming, he just retreats, right? He runs to fight another day. In this case, they probably couldn't retreat or run to fight another day because they're in a defensive, they're in a siege position around this city. So if you have the balls and you want to crush, I mean literally destroy, if you want to destroy your enemy or get them in that pincer move, or if you want them to surrender, the double envelopment is good for that too. So I'm not sure if I'm explaining this good enough. So let me, so Game of Thrones, right? The Battle of the Bastards. The Battle of the Bastards is a perfect example of a double envelopment. Okay, so the Battle of the Bastards is set up where Jon Snow's army is going for Ramsay Bolton's army, and they're fighting to get Winterfell, this castle. So it's a battle of attrition. It's a war of attrition. It's down to the last man. So when they're setting up, Jon Snow has the maps and stuff, and he's like laying out how the formations are going to work, and he explains to the Giant's Bane. He explains to Giant's Bane that they have trenches dug on each side, so they can't get this pincer move. They can't get it all. They can't be flanked on either side because they have these trenches. And the guy's Giant's Bane's like he doesn't understand, and he's like, so he can't hit us from both sides. And the guy's like, okay, yeah, now I get it. Anyhow, so what Bolton does, Ramsay Bolton, what he does is he has to goad Jon's army away from those trenches so he can enact this pincer move that he wants to do. Because it's a totally like I said, it's the stone cold stunner of this battlefield maneuvering. So he does the gambit with Rickon, where he has him run and he shoots him full of arrows, just close enough to Jon, and then it enrages him. This is that. It's so stupid when you watch it, but it's like Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, heroism feels and never reasons, therefore is always right. Well, that's just bullshit, because Jon falls for this trap. He lets his emotions rule him, and his army moves out of the protection of those trenches. And basically, as soon as they do, they get this double envelopment. They get smashed from both sides, and that turns into being surrounded because there's a wall of dead men behind them and in front of them. So they get stuck in this kill box, and then they have these long shields with these sharp swords and sticks, spears, and they just move in and just fucking just cut. It's like a Cuisinart. It's a battlefield Cuisinart. So a lot of that is tactics stuff, not strategy stuff. So we're, I'm not saying that the double envelopment that Odo puts on here has the interlocking shields and the spears and they move in. I'm just talking about the general concept of this pincer move. So he smashes into them. When they are confused, they're trying to get their formation back together. He, in turns, does this pincer move and just destroys these fucking guys. This whole army just gets fucking slaughtered. They did not surrender. They chose option B, and they just got this humiliating defeat from a guy named Odo. So Odo would go on to lose the next battle or two, and that's why he did not have the same air of glory that we're going to see Charles the Hammer Martel have at the end of this story. But I should have mentioned that he actually, when they were sieging Aquitaine, Odo went to Charles for help. He was like, yo, you should bring your guys down here, and then we can fuck these guys up. And Martel did not help him. I don't know why. I'm not sure what that's all about. Except maybe I do. We'll see here in a few minutes. So in 723 October, Abdul Rahman I'm going to fuck this up until I get used to it. Hold on. Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi led this massive army from Spain into France. The numbers wildly vary from account to account. And then, like, if you read enough of these accounts, like, you realize the people that were there are full of shit anyways. When they talk about these numbers, they vary wildly. So the source, or the numbers we're sticking with, are the Franks had between 15 and 20,000 troops, and the Caliphate had 20 to 25,000 troops. So that's, I mean, you want to say, well, you know, the number goes to the Caliphate for sure. However, they have a combat force multiplier, and that is the Caliphate has a heavy cavalry. Which is something that Martel didn't have. The Europeans did not roll with this heavy cavalry at the time. You know, we've all fucking seen Braveheart. So, hold on. I got to talk about, I don't know what's with all the pop culture references all of a sudden in this episode, but okay. So Braveheart took place in, I'm not sure what the time span was, but, well, the Battle of Stirling Bridge took place in 1297. So we'll just say it was actually September 11th, 1297, which is, you know, interesting, I guess. Serendipitous. William Wallace says when they're talking about the heavy cavalry, we all know, I'm going to try to do my William Wallace impersonation. He says, Uncle Argyle used to talk about it, how no army ever stood against a charge of heavy horse. Well, Uncle Argyle should have studied the hammer and the Battle of Tours. So that's the one where they built the giant spears and killed all the horses during the charge. So, I mean, the story we're talking about is taking place in 723, and Braveheart takes place in it takes place in 1297. So, starting October 4th, 723. Hold on, I'm going to do this real quick. I want to officially announce this. We have a limited series coming up called Abracast, the American Sermon. It's a look at the occult foundation of the United States. We're going to be looking at all of the weird, sort of offbeat and sinister stuff tied into the creation of the United States. And we're pretty excited about this. It's officially starting March 3rd. There will probably be at least one early episode if you want to keep your eye, if you want to get a sneak peek of it. Just so I can get the RSS feed and stuff straightened out. So, you know, you can look for it at abracast.com. You can definitely look for it at Spreaker, and then we'll roll it out on other platforms just as fast as we can. Thank you guys. I'm really excited about this. I hope you will join me. right. Where was I? So, starting on October 4th, 723, the Franks started having these skirmishes with the scout forces of Gafiki. Gafiki's scout, he would break off these small unit tactics. He would send small teams in to harass Charles's men. You know, this is what Sun Tzu would have told him to do. You know, you use these small unit tactics to harass the enemy, try to get him pissed, and try to get him to follow you into an ambush. However, God damn it, Charles Martel was fucking brilliant. Martel's army. Okay, so. You know, we talk about this stuff all the time whenever we get into these history episodes. Martel's army occupied a slightly higher ground. And as we all know from episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, you always want to have the high ground. Give up, Anakin. I've got the higher ground. And his position was tied into this wooded area. So we've seen this, you know. We've never done an episode of the Hot Gates or the Battle of Thermopylae, but we have done an episode on Boudica. This is what Boudica did, tying her army into terrain. We talk about this all the time. You tie your defensive position into terrain features. So here, Martel's got the high ground, and he uses this wooded area to protect his flanks. And you're like, well, you can still send soldiers through wooded areas. Yeah, but you have to understand, remember, what they're worried about is this cavalry charge. So they're like, you can't send a cavalry charge through the fucking woods. So he's got this wooded area. He's got his formation tied into this wooded area, and he wouldn't budge. You know, they come to harass them, and he just stayed put. He just fight them off, whatever. Stay put. We're not following them. This way, he was set up in his position, and also another thing I guess it did is you hear that it helped hide his numbers, which I'm not sure he was worried about that. But the wooded area also, we're going to see, besides protecting his flanks from a double envelopment and a cavalry charge, it also gave him the cover for this trick that he's going to do later. So we'll get to that in a minute. So the Frankish army stood fast and was not drawn into the ambush by these little harassing forces. This is important because Charles choosing the battlefield, besides not having a cavalry and besides having lesser numbers, it gave him a few of these advantages. And the other thing that he had figured on, and this is one of the reasons that he's so brilliant, one of the many, he also knew that Gafiki would have to strike sooner rather than later. Remember, it was October already, and this Caliphate's army was not prepared for the winter. Also, they did not have a supply chain. They were living off the land, and horses eat a lot of fucking food. So instead of falling for a trap, instead of becoming enraged, having hubris and fall for a trap, follow this small unit into the woods to fucking fight them and get drawn into some bullshit. Instead of doing that, he gets the goat of Gafiki because he stands fast and he doesn't move and he's got the higher ground and he's tied into a terrain feature. And he's like, go fuck all your extra numbers. And by the way, go fuck all your horses. Fuck them. Fuck all that shit. I'm staying right here, and you're going to have to fucking fight me, or you're just going to have to leave. Either way, it would have worked out for Martel, as we'll see. Imagine what it would have been like. On October 10th, Gafiki sent his heavy cavalry in. Imagine what it would have been like. These screaming fucking Muslims charging at you with these giant horses. Imagine as they collide with your shields, breaking, fucking arms flying through the air, hot horses' blood spraying in your face. And these Frank lines hold. They just hold. One account says, one account says Charles' men stood like a northern glacier against the attack. And I'm like, fuck, man, that's heavy that's fucking heavy metal. And imagine what that did to the psychology of the jihadists. They're like, oh, we got these horses and shit, and like no one can stand against them. And then like these fucking Frenchmen, what would become the Frenchmen? These Franks are just like, hey, go fuck yourself. Swivel yourself, bitch. And then they're like, boom, and a fucking cavalry charge just breaks on them. So you have to imagine that probably a few here and there broke the line, and they would have got like pushed back out. It's like a mosh pit kind of move. So while all this was going down, the trick Charles did a trick. He sent Odo in a small unit to the enemy camp, which was I think like 2 miles or something behind the battle. And he sent him using the cover of this wooded area. So he sent him around the battlefield into the enemy camp. And once Odo was there, he stole back all this plundered treasure, and he freed all the slaves that they had caught. And then he started fucking burning down the camp. And when the Caliphate army saw this, they looked back. You could see their camp burning, and that you could see not the Crusaders, sorry. You could see like the Western, you could see the Frankish army inside their camp. They turned. Some of them broke ranks and tried to get back to the camp to save their slaves and their treasure. And then this set off a chain reaction because others who were more forward on the line saw this, and they thought that there was a retreat order had been given, and they started breaking ranks. And Gafiki had lost control of his army, and it fell apart. It just fell into confusion. You have people running back to the camp where they're going to get massacred, and then on the front line, you have them breaking rank, and all the while you have Charles the Hammer Martel. And that is when it happened. That is when it happened. All fucking hell broke loose. Charles and his army pounded what was left of Gafiki's forces, and they sent them to their fucking virgins. And Charles was victorious. Gafiki lay dead at his feet. Charles went on the offensive after the Gafiki's army was scattered, and Charles went on the offensive, and he started riding back down towards Spain, kicking over all these little Muslim strongholds. He would fucking just kick them over. And all that was left of the Muslim army limped humbly back to Spain. And it's a testament to all this. They never returned to Spain, or they never returned to France again. So this battle took place in 723. And the Muslims held Spain for another 600 or 700 years, and they never once ventured back into France, which in and of itself suggests that it was more than a simple raiding party, I suppose. All right, so to wrap this thing up, I'm going to go to Horowitz's front page magazine. There's an article that says "Remembering the Battle of Tours" from October 9th, 2014, by Mark Tapson. We're going to skip down here towards the end. Some contemporary historians downplayed the magnitude of the Muslim threat, claiming that Rahman Gafiki's force was only a raiding party. They minimized the significance of the battle's outcome too. At least one historian even claims that Europe would have been better off if Islam had conquered it. But Hansen notes that the, quote, most of the renowned historians of the 18th and 19th century saw Poitiers, or the Battle of Tours, as a landmark battle that signaled the high water mark of Islamic advance into Europe, unquote. And if you remember when we were putting this stuff in context at the beginning of the episode, it's hard to say that it wasn't. I mean, they'd taken over the Levant, Egypt, Mesopotamia, part of India. Like, how can you say that it was not some kind of expansion? Definitely some sort of trend. In that direction. Edward Creasy included it in among the 15 decisive battles of the world. Many believe that if Charles, whom the Pope afterwards dubbed Martel, or the Hammer, had not stopped Rahman Gafiki at Tours, there would have been nothing to prevent Europe from ultimately becoming Islamic. Edward Gibbon called Charles, quote, the savior of Christendom, unquote, and wrote the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire in 1776, that if not for Charles' victory, quote, perhaps the interpretation of the Quran would now be taught in the schools of Oxford, unquote. If only Gibbon could see Oxford now. Not only is the interpretation of the Quran taught here, but Islam thrives in Oxford thanks partly to the patronage of Dhimmi Prince Charles. Dhimitude, Dhimmi, Dhimmi, or it's called Dhimitude, is it's like a rank. It's like a second-class citizen in Islamic-controlled territories. So you're not a slave, but you're like a second-class citizen. You have to pay the jizya, which is not dirty. It sounds dirty. It's not dirty. The jizya is a tax that you have to pay because you're a dhimmi. This is not all in this article. This is just shit that I know. His essay, quote, Islam in Oxford, quote, faux moderates Muslim scholar Mokhtar Khan writes smugly that if Gibbon would have been surprised to learn the lesson that military defeats do not stop the advance of civilizations and the globalization of Islam is unimpeded by the material and the military weakness of the Muslim world. Apart from his dubious suggestion that Islam has anything to do with the advance of civilization, Khan is right. Today, the Islamic invasion of Europe and the rest of the West is of the demographic, not military sort. The continent faces an immigration crisis from at least one generation of young Muslims, many of whom not only are willingly unassimilated, but who are waging cultural and physical aggression against their hosts and establishing parallel communities ruled by Sharia and no-go zones of violence towards the infidel. Nothing can stop the spread of Islam, insists Islamic apologist Reza Aslan. There are those who would try, but it simply will not happen. Absolutely nothing can stop the spread of Islam. This guy sounds like he's fucking Paul Muad'Dib. So when I said that the Muslims never stepped foot back into France after the Battle of Tours, I should say until they open their borders. I remember when I lived in Germany, they, even back then in the 90s, they had a problem with Turkish immigrants. Violent. I actually knew a guy who got fucking knifed by a Turk. He lived. He was okay, but he got fucked up, boy. They slid one right between his ribs. Charles Martel begged to differ in 732. The tide was turned back then, and if necessary, it can be turned back again by new Martels. Where is that group? The new Martels. The conflict is different now. It's far from being as straightforward and elemental as two armies facing off. And so those who... All right, this is all political nonsense after this. All right, just we're gonna wrap this. We're wrapping it up. We're gonna go to Wikipedia under the Charles Martel. Apart from his military endeavors, Charles is considered to be a founding father of the European Middle Ages. Skilled as an administrator as well as a warrior, he is credited with a seminal role in emerging responsibilities of the Knights of Courts, and therefore in the development of the Frankish system of feudalism. Pope Gregory III, whose realm was being menaced by the Lombards and who could no longer rely on help from Constantinople, which would later be called Istanbul, because Istanbul was once Constantinople. He asked Charles to defend the Holy See and offered him the Roman consulship, although Charles declined. He divided Francia, he divided Francia between his sons Carloman and Pepin. The later became the first of the Carolingians. Charles' grandson Charlemagne, who we know from the Song of Oliver Roland episodes, extended the Frankish realms to include much of the West and became the first emperor in the West since the fall of Rome. So you can see this guy, he had foresight, he had violence of action, he had the planning, he knew what the fuck was going on, and he was the granddad of Charlemagne. I mean, it's hard to get much better than that. He stopped the Islamic press into Europe for like fucking 700 years or something like that. It's pretty fantastic. All right, I'm John. This has been the Abercast. Hey bros, don't forget the American Sermon is starting on March 3rd. It's the limited series that we're going to be looking at the occult foundation of the United States. There will be an early episode up before that, like an episode 0, at least one of them, just so I can get the RSS feed and stuff straightened out. So if you're hawk-eyed and you're looking for it, they give you something to look for. Let's not forget to go to abercast.com. The feature topic links, they're all broke down nice and easy there, searchable, so you can find the shit that you like. Also, social media links are down at the bottom. Let me know what you think about tonight's show. There's also a mailing list for bonus content this month. The download is a fun Lesser Key of Solomon worksheet. It is pretty fun. It's pretty fun. So 5-star reviews, guys. 5-star reviews. Don't leave me some bullshit review telling me to edit my show. Just find something else to listen to.